What's up, party people, and welcome to another edition of Countdown to Classic. This is a podcast that educates, informs, and gossips about World of Warcraft Classic. Each episode we discuss the news, hot button issues, and content of the highly anticipated World of Warcraft Classic. I'm your host, Josh Corbett, and this is a show where it's not my opinion on World of Warcraft that counts, but yours. If you're new to the show, Countdown to Classic goes through your expert input and a little bit of mine on this one as well, on everything relating to the sure-to-be amazing World of Warcraft Classic. I do apologize that this one is a little bit late, a couple of days post the date that you're normally expecting Countdown to Classic, but obviously I have a real life as well, and I did have to spend some quality time with the girlfriend this week as she is traveling stateside for the next 2 weeks, and so of course I wanted to do the dutiful boyfriend thing, so that's why you got the delay. But today, we'll be turning once again to the forums and breaking down the top 4 zones in World of Warcraft, as determined by a whole bunch of forum hopping and also a little bit of personal preference mixed in as well. After that, we'll tear through a whole bunch of anger management and memory lane listener submissions. And then we'll end the show with a call that I took a little while ago from 2 listeners all about gaming with a Y in World of Warcraft. So please do stick around for those segments as well. Just a reminder to also please follow me on Twitter at Count2Classic with the number 2, on Twitch at Countdown to Classic, and sign up to the epic Countdown to Classic Discord. Also, you can check out the show's Patreon page or throw me a coffee if you're enjoying what's going on here at Countdown to Classic, with all the links in the show notes for each episode. If you want to hit me up with some feedback or submit a memory lane or anger management of your own, you can always hit me up at feedback@countdowntoclassic.com as well. But with all that said, let's get to the forums with Forum and Fauna. Each forums episode, I turn to a multitude of forums online where fans just like you spout on about everything vanilla World of Warcraft. And what we've done today is, as I highlighted earlier, we're going through the top 4 zones, or the most beloved or nostalgic or memorable zones from vanilla World of Warcraft. This isn't a definitive list by any means. It's not in any particular order. This was just a vibe that I got in going through a vast number of forum threads and topics. I was really trying to do a good job of tallying up in my head as many times as I saw particular zone names popping up. I also threw out there on the Countdown to Classic Discord a little bit of a listener vote, and that helped persuade me as well as to what zones to actually talk about. If your favorite zone in the game isn't featured in this segment, I do apologize, but don't stress, because I promise that we will get to all of the zones at some point on Countdown to Classic. I will be trying to break down all of the zones as a lore episode at some point. It's going to take a very long time, but we'll get there eventually, so fear not. But alas, they can't all be winners, and we really got to boil it down to the best of the best. And so that's the purpose of this list that we're about to go through. Now, I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to read you a few forum posts in relation to each zone. And I know normally on Countdown to Classic, we go through the positives and the negatives of each zone. But given that we're talking about the best of the best, this is just going to be an absolute gush fest. We're going to throw a lot of love on these zones, and we'll forget about the negative. That can come when we do the lore episodes, if there is any negative points at all. But I'm going to go through some forum posts, then I'm going to give you a quick little bit of my personal thoughts and breakdown of each zone, and then that's how we'll be doing it for each zone. So I hope this takes somewhere around about 40 minutes or so. We'll see how we go. But first of all, we're going to go through Tirisfal Glades, one of my favorite zones in the game. Now, some of you might have heard on the show earlier, I would actually say this is equal number 1 for me in the game with Duskwood. Now, funnily enough, when we go through this top 4 listing, you're not going to hear Duskwood come up. And some of you may well say, Josh, what the fuck? Duskwood is amazing. And you're exactly right. Duskwood was actually the clear number 1 in my mind with trawling through the forums in the amount of times that I saw it come up. It is an absolute beloved questing zone in the game. However, we just recently featured Duskwood on the show, so I don't want to go through all of that again. But just know that Duskwood would be on this list were it not for that recent coverage on Countdown to Classic. So let's start with Tirisfal. And as I said, I'll go through the forum postings. And here we start with the official forums and user Eagle's Gift, who says this. In vanilla, your character became real. I vividly remember running back and forth between Tirisfal Glades and the Sepulchre, or the Sepulchre to some of you, picking up or turning in quests. These places became real. You quickly learned where the wolves were, what to avoid, and where you could safely relax. I spent many hours in the Azeroth Dark under the moons, contemplating my next move. The goals for the night were personal. Maybe I could find someone doing the same thing and wanted to combine forces. Or maybe it was quiet and I was alone with my thoughts and just taking in the beauty of the place. Maybe I went down to the Great Sea and looked for some Stranglekelp because I knew I could auction house some free action potions for good money. This is the game I miss. This is why I will be playing Classic. Next we turn again to the official forums, and this one from user FXCX, who says this. Brill! The inn, the spooky upbeat music with whatever the hell instrument they used for it gives me the chills every time. Next, this one from Teodo over at Reddit. But what stood out the most for me was Undeads and Tirisfal Glades. I always loved these zones, and these alone could drag me into the game again. The aesthetics, the quests were great too, the music was awesome, and the atmosphere was just extraordinary. I always felt like I walked in the footsteps of the Plague and played Warcraft 3, but now as an MMORPG. Next we've got this one from user Harandex, again at the WoW Classic subreddit. Tirisfal Glades is my favourite, mainly for the feel of despair in the zone, the undead clinging to their old life and trying to rebuild new lives. And then there's the Scarlet Crusaders and the Agamand Mills. Altogether, that makes it my favourite. Next we have this one from Hammer of the Gods at Wowhead, who says this. The best town in the game? Brill. Hands down. Tirisfal is by far my favourite starting area. The NPCs are interesting and creative. It's a stone's throw from the Undercity, and it's got a massive graveyard. Next we have this one from someone who is cool at Reddit again, who says this. The entire feeling of the Undead starting zone is about 80% of why I continued playing. I'd tried a Night Elf 2 years earlier with a different friend group and it didn't catch me. The atmosphere of Brill and Undercity were just so awesome that I wanted to see more of the world. And then it took years of my life. And next we've got this one from Robin Lai over at Reddit, who says this. I miss the old school Brill Inn. It was a place to meet for everyone, ranging from PvE to PvP and role-playing. Role-players used it as a place to be social. PvP would use it as a place to duel, and PvE would just chill around there or greet or help newbies on their adventures. And finally, we've got this one from Craig HX over at Wowhead, who says this. All Forsaken begin their unlives in Tirisfal Glades. No race is more isolated than the Forsaken. Fighting not only against the Alliance forces, but also the undead scourge held in ghastly thrall by the Lich King, few among even their allies in the Horde ranks would deem them trustworthy. Their presence is an aberration against nature, and their core motivations under the Demon Lord Varamathras are cloudy at best. Despite all the distrust, you'll note that many of the Forsaken simply wish to carry on their lives as before the plague came. As you journey through Tirisfal Glades, you'll see the twisted trappings of a humdrum existence. Apart from a few morbidly ambitious apothecaries, the Forsaken stance is predominantly defensive. In many ways, the Forsaken are two things they never wished to be: alive and alone. Yet, in defiance of their fatalist attitude reminiscent of the humans that they once were, they carry on despite the circumstances. You can see why some have called World of Warcraft's Undead a role player's dream come true. So, with the forum posts out of the way, now it's time for me to give you a little bit of my thoughts on why I've picked this zone as one of the top 4 zones in Vanilla World of Warcraft. Now, granted, it's something that came up a lot in the forums as I continued to read, but also I'm glad it did, because it fell in line with my own thoughts. As I mentioned, this is number 1 for me, tied number 1 with Duskwood. Why, you ask? Well, I've said on the show before, I really am a bit of a sucker for those dark areas within the game. Basically, that feeling of foreboding, that feeling of evil and doom and perilous nature, I just love it. And it's got a real Dark Souls vibe to it that, again, I'm a Dark Souls fan. This kind of stuff really does sing out to me. The death, undeath, just the zombies and crypts and everything. It's freaking awesome, and I love it. So that's why I always gravitated towards the undead whenever I dabbled with the Horde back in the day. Now, I was an Alliance player, but if I go Horde, which I will be for Classic, it's going to be with the undead, and I really do look forward to getting stuck into this race one more time because of this amazing starting area. One of the things that kept coming up during all these forum postings about the favorite zones was that starting zones really did come up a lot. Why is that? Well, we're kind of rooted in nostalgia in a way. I know people don't like to hear that when we talk about Classic, saying it's not nostalgia. It's not nostalgia. We want Classic because it's an amazing game, which is true, but our nostalgia is still very much there, and people equate some of their fondest memories in the game, obviously, with the moments when they first appeared in the game. When you first played, those first few minutes, those first few hours, those first few quests, those first few dings, they all happened in your starting area. Hence why, in the forums, so many people are yelling out, Tirisfal Glades, Elwyn Forest, Mulgore. You hear it all the time, and that's fantastic because I do tend to agree with people. That's something that I will never forget. You know, one of my favorite zones also is Teldrassil, which is coming up on this list later on because I started there as a Night Elf Rogue all those years ago. And it's just something that's how I experienced the game the first time. But anyway, I digress. Getting back to why Tirisfal Glades is amazing. Now, starting off in Death Knell, I think as one of those posts alluded to, the one thing that I really like is that there are very much smatterings of the past lives of the undead, and I enjoy the fact that they are quite clearly, through the lore and through the general despair in the area and the text that you read when you talk to some of these characters, they really are coming to grips with a pretty big freaking change in their lives in that they are now undead. Well, they're not alive anymore. Are they alive? Are they not alive? You know, as one of those posts brought up, it said one of the two things that they are now is alive and alone. And how you categorize alive might be a funny way, a bit of a debate. But I really enjoy they're making the best of it, and they're forging a little bit of a band of brothers or sisters as well, underneath Sylvanas. And I really do, you know, it's that camaraderie of being in a hopeless situation, but at least you kind of have other people. So I do take a little bit of issue with that post that said they're alone. I think they're alone in that, yes, they're a little bit slightly segregated from the rest of the Horde and whatnot, but they're still part of the Horde, and regardless of the distrust, they're still Team Horde. So, you know, they're not alone. It's all good. But anyway, you get out of Death Knell and you walk down the road to, as I mentioned earlier, what I also think is one of the greatest, well, the greatest town in the game, in Brill. And the music is amazing throughout the zone, particularly in Brill. They mentioned that in music, which really is quite unique. And then you get into some of the amazing quests that you get in the area. And people will remember things like, you know, we talked about the Agaman Mills. I'll get there in a second. But things around the surrounding area, like the Fields of Grief, you know, with the laced pumpkin, taking that to the captured Scarlet Zealot in the Gallows End Tavern. cabin, down the cellar. Stealing the pumpkins from the farm in the first place as well was a bit of fun. And then we've got stuff like, Proof of Demise and At War with the Scarlet Crusade, which I really did enjoy in terms of that introduction to who the Scarlet Crusade were, and also just basically going on a nice big fat kill quest and doing it several times over. First you go through the Scarlet Warriors, then you eventually go after Captain Perrine, then you get sent after for Captain Vachon as well and the Friars, and then you get after Captain Melrash. So you're basically just taking down the whole sort of hierarchy of the Scarlet Crusade's presence outside of the monastery, just in the outskirts of Tirisfal Glades, which I always found really fun. And the lore there as well ties it all together in terms of the undead struggle against this organization that is strictly at war with them. So I really, really enjoyed that too, to see the other side of the coin. Not everything is necessarily as simple as, there are humans and there are undead. And of course you root for the humans to cut down the undead. Well, now I'm playing an undead and there's another side to the story, and I kind of want to survive and I have a reason for doing so. So that's always been fun for me. I'm not a role player, but I do like being in the shoes of an undead and just absolutely ripping through the Scarlet Crusade during those quests. Then we've also got another one of my favorites, like when you visit Gunther's retreat, and you speak with obviously Gunther Arcanus, and you do the quest, that take you back and forth from Undercity to that little island just outside of Brill. And I always really enjoyed that for some reason, that little moment of isolation that character has, and swimming out to the little island. I found that nice, and I always use that little area as my first little spot to level up fishing. It brings back memories, and I do really enjoy it. I like the darkness, I like the gloominess, I like the monsters in the area. It's fantastic. And then obviously I'll finish up with this one, which is those amazing quests over at the Agamand Mills. And you've got the Haunted Mills and the Deaths in the Family quests, which if you haven't seen this, by the way, I really recommend jumping on YouTube and searching for Nixium's amazing video where he breaks down the stories of Deaths in the Family. It is, and also the Haunted Mills. It's a fantastic, about half-hour long breakdown, which I really, really thoroughly enjoyed, and I highly recommend it, as he does a bit of a deep dive into the lore of it all and why we're going there. So those particular quests, I always got a kick out of, the slow walk up that hill. And I always found it to be quite a walk when you turn the corner around that sort of slight, it's not a mountain range, but the slight, hilly area, and you turn to the right and you're going up the road towards the Agamand Mills. It's quite a long walk, I think. Well, it feels long. It's not that long. It is when you die, but you know what I mean? I felt that sense of foreboding as you go up the road, that you're now going to a little bit of a different area, like things are going to be different here. Sure, I might have killed some other mobs, in other areas, but here it might be a little bit of a harder ball game. And it wasn't necessarily tougher until you then get through that group quest and you're going through the crypts, and you get what is, each starting area has its kind of first non-instanced, relatively tough little mini dungeon that you might wind your way through. Obviously you might want to have some buddies along with you for the ride, because you might struggle to do it solo, or you probably will struggle to do it solo. But journeying through and around the Agamand Mills, I really did start to get it kicked in where, like, holy shit, people lived here, people worked here. This is where the plague tore through in Warcraft 3. I'm literally walking down roads and walking through fields and around windmills where people toiled away and lived a prosperous, family life, working life beforehand. And you are getting everything. You're living, breathing what happened in the past beloved game. And I really got a kick out of that I wasn't on train tracks anymore. I wasn't just plowing through the Warcraft 3 storyline. I actually got to stop and smell the roses around the outcome of what happened in Warcraft 3. And I personally got a really big kick out of that. It was a little bit tough going through that crypt for the first time when you go down to get, I forget who it is. I forget the mob. It might not even be one of the Agamans. It might be a separate mob. I can't quite remember. But I always found it a little bit tough where you had to group up and you basically get pushed for the first time by the game. You know, things like we'll go through it in Teldrassil. You've got like the when you go through the barrow dens and stuff like that. It's just stuff that, yes, it's not an instance, but it gives you that first little hint of like, hey, occasionally you're going to have to group up and help each other out if you want to get through all the content of this game. And to get something like that so early was really cool, and I really enjoyed it. So anyway, that's pretty much Tirisfal Glades, and I hope that everyone else enjoyed it as much as I did. Obviously, you got Undercity just down the road, and like, fuck, don't even get me started on the first time I went through Undercity. I think it's absolutely amazing. But I won't talk about that as much here. We'll do an Undercity lore episode later on Countdown to Classic, but it's something that will always be near and dear to my heart. So I hope that you all basically take a little bit of time at some point of your World of Warcraft lives to appreciate the beauty that is Tirisfal Glades. And it's an ugly beauty, but it's there. Anyway, we'll move on now to Tanarus. And basically, we'll start with the forums again, and we'll start with user Oglethorpe over at the WoW Classic subreddit, who says this: the love of this area does have to do with where you are in the game somewhat. You just got your badass talents and spells. You probably got your mount, and you're out of that 30 to 40 slump. I like Tanarus. Doing the Noggenfogger quest, killing pirates again, the outdoor troll ruins with the elite mobs. Fuck the Silithid though. But there's also one of the best dungeons in World of Warcraft, Zul'Farrak. A super punishing dungeon with a lot of trash. Mobs that heal, mobs that hex, and zombies. Just a lot of stuff that you really have to be careful about. And you really get your 90 gold worth from your mount. The first and only outdoor 5-man. Next we have this one from user THP, who says this: there's definitely a fantasy in climbing the dunes of a big lonely barren desert. Imagine crossing the shimmering flats and finding the last bastion of civilization, a small goblin merchant town, before a vast unforgiving desert. Each quest sends you further out into the wastes, and only when you think the scattered sands will never end, you stumble upon the caverns of time for the first time. A pile of out-of-time relics inexplicably dropped in the middle of a barren desert guarded by level question mark dragons with a great barred entrance you desperately want to explore. You leave the place bewildered, wanting answers. Keeping the distant seashore to your left, you trail deeper south into the unexplored waste. Peering over a dry rocky bluff, you're eventually confronted by a horrifying sight. A great writhing mass of spindly insectoid growths jutting straight out of the earth, like a colossal living cancer spread over the sands. Little knowing the full scope and horror that existed far to the west in Silithus, you put as many tracks between it and you as you're able to. Trailing west along the mountains, you come across a great vault, guarded by stone elementals. What forgotten Titan secret have you revealed in the furthest reaches of the world? I could really go on, but the point is that Tanarus is a big, bleak, lonely desert, and that's exactly what makes it so hauntingly beautiful. Not to mention that it houses some of the coolest and most mind-blowing locations in the game, which are all the more cool when contrasted against the nothingness that surrounds them. It's one of the funnest zones to explore for the first time, and left a strong nostalgic impression for me at least. Next we have this one from user Gene Ralph, who says this: Gadgetzan very much felt like the end of the civilized world, in a way that extended even beyond Tanarus to the entire region. Pre 1.8, which added Cenarian Hold, anything beyond was untamed remote frontier for Tanarus and the next two zones. Next we have this one from listener Trivnium, who tells us this: also, the architecture of Gadgetzan reminds me of Tatooine from Star Wars Episode 4, where you can really find a wretched hive of scum and villainy. Next we have this one from user Hatefiend, who says this: escorting the chicken across the entire map all the way to the dock, then having a 60 hunter 3-shot you. Next we have this one from user Treasure33333, who says this: Open, clear spaces are kind of attractive, don't you think? It gives a different feeling of environment compared to most of the other zones. No roads, nothing some enemy can hide behind. You can openly see in all directions and so on. Freedom, basically. It's relaxing and relieving in a way. Also, it's on the edge of the world. There are pirates, turtles, Zul'Farrak, this light blue ocean, etc. Quests are plentiful and quite easy and aren't tedious. It's really one of the easiest, smoother going questing experiences, in my opinion. But there is PvP. Next we have this one from user Ponies Love Kittens, who says this. It's a level 40 zone. For a lot of people, it would have been the first zone they quested in after getting their mount. So comparatively, it would have seemed much faster and smoother than prior zones. Plus, engineers can teleport there, so less time wasted getting there and back. Throw in a conveniently placed and memorable dungeon right next to town, and what's not to like? And next we've got this one from user Lewis is Good, who tells us this. Man, oh man, this just stirred up my excitement for Classic again. Tanarus is one of my favourite zones in the game, close to Ungoro. You get out of that slump, have a new mount, and you take on the wastes, the wide open desert at full speed. You clear the flats, the Thousand Needles, and come up over a small hill and you see it. A goblin town in the middle of the desert. The music starts up and your imagination just starts running wild. It makes you feel like you've travelled long and far and ended up in a completely different world. If I've ever gotten a resembled feeling of culture shock in a video game, the first time I went to Tanarus is it. Also, navigating it is quite straightforward, which I love. I need to go to X on the map. It's practically a straight shot. You don't have to navigate around cliffs and caves. It's just all right there. Next we have this post over at Wowhead, and I've forgotten this user's name, sorry, but they said this. I made a game out of Noggenfogger elixirs called Noggenfogger Russian Roulette. The rules are basically that everyone gets together and jumps off of Thunder Bluff, and we all use a Noggenfogger elixir at the last moment to see who wins. If you don't get Slowfall, then you die. If you do it right, there should be no res timer. And if you do it where I am in my example video, when you release, you'll be within resurrection range instantly. And make sure you take off your armor like we did. Next we have this post from Sid Frostfire, who says this. I really loved Tanarus in general, which is kind of funny for me since I usually don't care for desert zones. I guess I just liked the sense of danger. You had an entire area of sand trolls, including a dungeon, Silithid mounds, bandit camps and hideouts everywhere, a pirate cove, ogre camps, etc. Even the main town didn't really feel quote-unquote safe at all, since it was a neutral area where you could be ganked. Also, the music and ambient sounds were a great fit for the zone. And finally, we've got this post from Nightsea over at the WoW official forums, who says this. Stranglethorn Vale turns boys into men. Tanarus turns men into warriors. And I did enjoy that one to finish up on. But what is it about Tanarus now that we really love? Now, I must admit, I'm going to have to delve back into the memory banks here because I didn't spend a boatload of time in Tanarus myself. Yes, I definitely leveled there, but I didn't fall in love with the zone as much myself as many of you seem to have. I definitely enjoyed it. I didn't dislike Tanarus, but I would say it was middle of the road for me. But I will happily feign a bit of love for the purpose of the podcast and go through what all of you loved about the zone. And obviously we just heard a lot of examples in all those forum posts. But one thing I will say is that, God, I did love Zul'Farrak. I really, really did. I know technically that's sort of on its own, being that instance. I won't really sort of tie it into Tanarus as much, even though it's in the zone. But I loved Zul'Farrak. It was a favorite instance of mine design-wise. But Tanarus in general, look, I really appreciate what one of those posts said because I felt the same thing in terms of feeling like you'd just been dropped into Star Wars Episode 4. I felt felt like I was on Tatooine. And maybe, the area on a whole is a little bit of an homage in a way to Tatooine by the designers and the devs. In saying that, I completely appreciate that, just because it's a desert, it's got to be Tatooine, does it? No, I understand you can have a desert area in the game and the link doesn't have to be drawn. But it's just something that I felt. And also just having Gadget Sand there in the middle of fucking nowhere, I really felt like that Mos Eisley type of vibe. And as they say, the scum and villainy being a neutral area, yes, maybe you were on edge. And it kind of again, I didn't play on a PvP server, and it's actually something that I've never really had to deal with. But I completely appreciate that if you were on a PvP server, it would have added a little bit of extra excitement to the zone for sure. So yes, scum and villainy, getting knifed in the back, why not? I understand. But that expansiveness and also the ability to basically see ahead and not have to navigate hilly areas. I must say that one of my greatest pet peeves in World of Warcraft, and something that I've really been experiencing lately in game, is I actually have grown a really great sort of lack of patience for navigating hilly or mountainous zones. I am so bad when it comes to judging inclines. I always look at something and go, yeah, I could run up that. That's all right. And then, of course, you get halfway up and realize that you're not going to get up there at all and the incline's too steep and you've got to turn around and come back and go all the way around. I do this on a regular basis. Look, I'm not the smartest gamer at times. I might be smart in real life, but I'm not the smartest gamer, oddly enough. I regularly have to tear my hair out about navigating these sort of inclines in game. But obviously in Tanarus, not an issue. You like flat stuff, you like open plains, well, we've got it here in Tanarus. And that really was kind of a welcome change for me back in the day for sure, that I could see what was coming. There weren't many surprises. There was nothing hiding for me in the shadows. It's just, look, there's a mob up there. I'll go and get it. If I get attacked from anywhere behind or the side, I'm probably going to see it coming. It's all good. And I enjoy that as a sort of average player. So that really does tickle my fancy. But also, sand in general. Let's talk sand. Now, some of you might not like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere. But with this, it really does give a different, obvious color scheme to the zone, which is, I find it to be oddly bright and dour all at the same time. It's absolutely everywhere. And it's one of those things where, at least when you're in a forest type region like Teldrassil or Ashenvale, it's green everywhere, but it's kind of beautiful. But with Tanarus, sand as far as the eye can see. Sand, you want sand? We got sand. It doesn't really do a lot for me in the aesthetics department, but I realize that a lot of you are totally okay with it. And as I say, this is something that came up a lot. I was a little bit surprised by how much love Tanarus got in the forums, but it was there. So here I am talking about it, even though it's middle of the road for me, it's beloved by many of you. So what are some of the quests, obviously, that keep you coming back to Tanarus that you enjoy? Well, you've got to always rescue 00X-17/TN, which is obviously the mechanical chicken that a lot of you love doing the escort quest for. The Noggin Fogger elixir that was touched on earlier, which comes up in the Thirsty Goblin quest chain, which is obviously one of the most beloved items in the game. Everyone's got time for Noggin Fogger elixir. There's things like that do, again, kick up the nostalgia for people in this area, and I totally get that. So good for you, Tanarus. I really appreciate that other people love you. I wish I was trying to get a listener call to gush about this area as much as I could, but I did it at the last minute for this episode. So in the future, if anyone wants to come on and do a much better job talking about how amazing Tanarus is, then please do get in touch with me and I'll happily have you come on the show. But let's go to the next area now and let's talk Stranglethorn Vale. And we'll start with this post from user Braun over at the WoW Classic official forums, who says this: Apocalypse Now soundtrack begins playing. The only zone where taking a path feels like going in on a Huey, lol. Next we have this one from user Siegfried, who says this: PvE players don't have any understanding of what made Stranglethorn Vale great. I wonder, did players in vanilla PvE servers ever do tournaments in the arena there? I remember doing them with a few guilds, and we needed bouncers to keep Alliance out while we were doing our thing. That was a lot of fun. So was Booty Bay, with all the guards chasing and killing us as we battled all over that town. Next we have this one from Ripcord, who tells us this. STV is the best. Leveling through the 30s there is one of the most fun times I've had in World of Warcraft. I make sure to have some decent gear, and the 1v2 and 1v3s are such a fun challenge. The paranoia has me on the edge of my seat the whole time. If you don't watch your back every few seconds, a group will run up behind you and you are in trouble. If there is a 60 around ganking, it makes it less fun, but there's still a lot of 30s versus 30s fights. Next we have this one from user Prexus, who says this. I'm looking forward to first getting to Stranglethorn Vale and just starting the real game in Classic. Next we have this from user Diadatane, who says this. Stranglethorn Vale, the weather effects and jungle music. Drinking in between mobs while leveling, looking around while the mana bar is filling up and thinking, wow, I love this game. Next we got this one from user Grogzo, who tells us this. Stranglethorn Vale was absolutely my favourite. The PvP that went on there, being able to hide in bushes to prevent from getting ganked, the quests, that zone was just beautiful. I also remember kiting those invincible mobs from Blasted Lands there to the Horde outposts and watching the guards beat on them for days. Next we have this one from user Ceralorai, who tells us this. Stranglethorn Vale was the best for me, in part because of just how huge that place was. Trying to get all the way down to Booty Bay from Darkshore in your mid to late 20s was an adventure all on its own, but worth it. There's such an objective difference between how strong your character was when you started the zone to how you were when you finished. You just felt like the king of the world. So, Stranglethorn Vale, STV, or STV at NAM to all of you on PvP servers. It's a bit of a funny experience for me, this one, because obviously as a PvE player, I had an incredibly different consumption of Stranglethorn Vale than many of you did. I still absolutely loved the area, and I fully condone it being here in this top 4 zones of Vanilla WoW. However, the main reason that people love STV is because of the world PvP aspect, which is not something that I ever experienced. So I do find it interesting that even though I didn't get involved in the Gankfest, I still came to love it because of the aesthetics and the general look and feel of the zone and the questing and everything combined. It's something where I completely appreciate that world PvP was a huge part of vanilla World of Warcraft, and I will be rolling on a PvP server for Classic. So I'm busting to get to Stranglethorn Vale because I want to know what everyone is talking about in terms of just how much of a war zone this area was. Now, there were the quests that people enjoyed as well, things like, you know, the Green Hills of Stranglethorn. I now remember, in a call that you're about to hear, actually, I got reminded about that one. I hadn't thought of it in years, but collecting all of those pages, the Bloodsail Buccaneers, you know, if you Horde, the Gromgol base camp, things like the Rebel camp for Alliance and Colonel Curzon, all of that stuff. Good times from back in the day, but it's something where I really appreciated that jungle vibe, the lush green nature of STV, and that's why you're about to hear the final zone that we're going to touch on is Teldrassil. Something about the green, sort of really alive areas of the World of Warcraft that I also gravitate to. It's funny because you say, Josh, hang on, you just said you love the dead areas. Why do you love the green alive areas as well? Well, I guess it's sort of push and pull in both directions. I don't really like much in between, but I want either vibrant and lush and green and alive or dark, dead and decrepit. And I'm not really much on the zones in between those two. So it's a kind of funny one for me. But I do love the colors that you hit with in the zone, and also just the amount of players that, even if you're not PvPing, that you see running around. You know, it is obviously a neutral territory. It's something that everyone gravitates towards once they hit, you know, around their 30s. And it's so nice to realize that, like, holy shit, yes, there are a vast number of people playing not only this game, but on my server, in this area. It's great to actually see the population going back and forth and doing their thing. Now, one of the things that's also touched on in a call that you're about to hear is the troll architecture that you see around the area. I love that as well, and you'll hear why in the call. But there's a great amount of it, obviously, throughout Stranglethorn Vale for lore reasons, which I absolutely love. I love getting to know the residents of the area and their history simply by way of placing a few objects or buildings around. It really does do it for me in terms of immersing myself in this zone and not just having just a drab, boring old zone that, you know, doesn't have much lore attached to it or anything like that. That does it for me. So that's fantastic about Stranglethorn Vale. But you're also there for so damn long. It has a very broad level range. Everyone knows that. You can go there from about 28 all the way through to about 42, something like that. So you can really set up camp in Stranglethorn Vale for quite a while if you so please. It's one of the things I really do love about World of Warcraft is the amount of options that it does give you per leveling bracket. And there are zones that players legitimately don't know that well because they didn't spend a boatload of time in because they were off leveling in other areas. The game opened up to you, unfurled, and said, look, choose your own adventure. You decide where you want to go. Look, here's 3 areas for your level range, and they're all a little bit different in design, so which one do you prefer? And you could kind of, you know, pick and choose. Some were obviously more optimal than others in that they had more quests, things like that, or they were just more enjoyable, but at least we did have choices. So I really enjoyed that. But yes, more often than not, a lot of us spent a lot of time in Stranglethorn Vale and found ourselves coming back, even after dabbling elsewhere, I would presume. So there's a lot of quests to do here, a lot of fun. I love Booty Bay. I love rocking up to Booty Bay for the first time and sort of feeling like Captain Jack Sparrow in a way and just walking into this absolute mess of a town in a way. It's quite fun the way it's all put together, but you're a pirate, basically. You're walking into Pirate Town, and the whole of Stranglethorn Vale does have a little bit of that pirate vibe, the Pirates of the Caribbean, in terms of that tropical sort of island feel that you get to it in terms of unexplored and dangerous, and there's their hidden treasure around that corner. It's all a lot of fun. But what I'll do for you now is I'll play a quick listener call. It goes for about 5 or 6 minutes that I took about the love of Stranglethorn Vale. So here you go. Please do enjoy this one. Okay, I've enlisted the help of yet another Countdown to Classic listener in regards to the zones in the game. And who have we got, and where in the world are you calling from?
I go by Cryptic, or in game usually Seon, and I am from the United States.
Excellent. Thanks so much for calling in, Cryptic. I put the bat signal up essentially to the Countdown to Classic Discord about these 4 zones in the game that I'm discussing in this episode, and you answered the call about Stranglethorn Vale. So what I was hoping to get is a bit of listener feedback on why is it that you love Stranglethorn Vale so much?
Well, the main reason I liked it was because, I think I spent the last probably 10 or so levels in Duskwood, which is kind of dreary. I love Duskwood too, but and so Duskwood and Westfall, and it was kind of a nice change of scenery with the lush forest and everything. I thought it was really cool when I first found it. So just the change of pace, it was pretty cool as a rogue, being able to sneak around with that added I was kind of behind the curve, so there were a bunch of high levels running around. So if I ganked somebody, which I did quite often, they'd call their buddies in and I'd get my ass kicked. So it kind of helped to be able to hide in bushes and stuff too, even though I was stealthed, kind of make myself a little bit harder to find too. So peeking around trees, that sort of thing.
Now, were you playing on a PvP server as a rogue?
Yeah.
Okay, so The one thing that I never experienced, as some people know, is a PvP server, and I played on a PvE server as a rogue, and I enjoyed slipping through the shadows of STV as a rogue, but it had no danger attached to it because people couldn't gank me. What was it like for you being, and obviously you're touching on one of the main things that people love about STV is the sort of PvP fest that it is, the gankerpalooza that it can turn into, if you're not careful, obviously, and there are people everywhere. But what was that like as a rogue? Did you feel that it was slightly different to other people's experiences because you could elect when to engage and when not to, and perhaps STV was a little less dangerous for you?
Yes and no. I mean, I'd say it was probably better in most cases if I was out of combat. But you know what leveling a rogue was like, and if you're in the middle of fighting something and someone jumps you, you're just dead. Like, there's not a whole lot you can do about it. So as long as I wasn't in the middle of something, it's kind of nice being able to pick your fights. With the way vanilla was then, everyone's all excited. It's a brand new game, you know, everyone's wanting to kill each other. I think, at least with some of the private servers I've played on, it seems like people are kind of in a rush to get to endgame content, so they don't really bother with the opposite faction as much, at least from what I've seen. So I'd say it was definitely nice being able to pick my fights for the most part then, but I haven't ran into as many issues on private servers.
Now, having addressed that PvP reason for loving the area, outside of that, talking aesthetics and quest lines and things like that, is there anything else that really drew you to STV? I can tell you, for me, to give you a bit of a jumping off point, I think that part of my love for STV is because of its unique look and feel. I feel like as much as I love a lot of the zones in vanilla, some of them are relatively similar to others. You know, I think of parallels like Teldrassil and Ashenvale and Duskwood and Tirisfal Glades. They kind of feel the same in a way. Also, some people might jump up and down, but like Thousand Needles and Desolace for me as well. But STV for me really was one of a kind. Did you get that impression when you were there?
I mean, I'd say it shared some similarities with Ungoro, but I didn't really, obviously I hadn't hit that area by that point, but yeah, it was definitely the first time I had ever seen any sort of tropical environment like that. And I'm really a big fan of the troll architecture too, like all the ruins and stuff. I thought that was pretty cool.
Oh, I completely agree with you. I think whenever you go by some kind of troll monument or anything like that, it's amazing. It reminds me a lot, again, tell me if I'm going too wild with the analogy, and you're 100% right on the Ungoro thing. I did forget that. I would suggest that STV, obviously a little bit more claustrophobic than Ungoro. In my mind, I feel like Ungoro is a little more open.
Yeah.
But in terms of the troll architecture, you know, I think of scenes like, you know, in The Lord of the Rings when they're going down the river in the boats and they pass the giant statues. And it's just that callback to a bygone era. And I get that sort of similar weird feel when you come across a troll structure and just these ancient civilizations that you go, wow, there is history here, and it's kind of cool to walk through it.
Yeah, definitely. I think it added a lot to the exploration aspect of STV.
Now, were there any, I know we're going back in the memory banks, but were there any quests or any particular parts of STV that stood out to you?
Well, I don't think anybody really likes doing the Green Hills of Stranglethorn or the Nezingwary hunting quests. I mean, doing the elites at the end was kind of cool, but as far as like, okay, let's go kill 10 tigers, let's go kill 10 more tigers, and why not 10 more tigers? It's kind of, I mean, nobody really liked that. Maybe I'm speaking for myself. Maybe people loved it, but I didn't like it a whole lot.
God, can I tell you, you just triggered something in me. I have legitimately not thought of the Green Hills of Stranglethorn in maybe 12 years. I had completely forgotten about that. And I sort of just did a combined shudder and smile at the same time thinking about that quest. I'm glad you jogged the memories there. That was definitely an interesting time back in the day collecting all of those.
Yeah, it was not my favorite quest.
All right. Well, thank you so much for calling in. I do appreciate you giving us a little bit of listener feedback on that zone. Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Anyway, with that call out of the way now, let's go to the final zone of the top 4 that we're going to be talking about. And as I said earlier, it's going to be Teldrassil. And let's get through the forum posts on this one. So, what are people saying about Teldrassil? Well, user Rilala says this. I actually think that, aside from how rough some of the character models are, vanilla really holds up in terms of beauty. Teldrassil on a private server takes my breath away as much as it does on live. If you consider the earliest intent with World of Warcraft was to construct the world of Warcraft and give playable characters this immense, lush, wonderful world to run around in and enjoy, aside from the way the continents are laid out, long and narrow really, I think they did some of the most remarkable design work in video game history, and that's a big part of why World of Warcraft did so darn well. Next, we have this one from user player CRCFVZ, who says this. How about Teldrassil's sound? You can always hear the phantom sounds of wisps in the trees whizzing by. Next, we've got this one from Old Sargeras, who tells us this over at the WoW Classic subreddit. I love Teldrassil because of the amazing trees that just blew my mind away when I started playing on the beta in 2004. I remember also being so stunned that you could go all the way from Aldrassil to Darnassus without a single loading screen. Yeah, I was used to Morrowind and those types of games. I thought this was absolutely amazing. Imagine my reaction when I found out about the rest of the map. Next we have this from user Rawzor, who tells us this. In terms of aesthetics, nothing beats Teldrassil. I love the ancient forest vibe it has going on, and it has great music, and it makes the whole place feel relaxing. Feralus and Ashenvale are similar, but not as good as Teldrassil. Next we have this one from user Treasure33333 again, who tells us this. Teldrassil, 9 out of 10, amazingly done zone, amazing music, some really interesting, well thought out, unorthodox quests, like the Satyrs quest, Zen's Bidding, that you do first just to realize that you served some evil, and then to redeem your mistakes, the Elf's Wells chain with files that you fill, corrupted trees and sleeping druid caves. And it's all for the most part united by one single theme of the corruption of the big tree itself, and uncovering why it is and how you can help. In my opinion, Teldrassil does the best job of putting you into some kind of a bigger story and giving meaning to your actions and the quests that you're doing and putting it all together, not just killing 10 mobs for whatever reason just to level up. The zone's layout is really well done. It's not just a plain field like some zones. It's got hills, valleys, lakes, rivers, and a waterfall even. Remember the giant walking guardian tree with its creaking sound and earth shaking? It honestly feels like out of all the starting zones, they put the most effort, work, and time into Teldrassil. Next, we have this one from user Hikara over at the WoW Classic official forums, who says this. The Teldrassil music just shoots me back so far into a giant hole full of nostalgia. It has to be my favorite, I think. Next, we've got this one from user Rayan Boadouche, who tells us this. Teldrassil has always been my favorite. Everything about it is just so damn cool. I really felt like I did something good there. I went around slaying evil magical monsters and saving powerful druids from the Emerald Dream. The wide range of just plain awesome in that zone is spectacular. Magic wells, harpies, furbolgs, killer animals, giant killer trees, and evil swamp monsters? I think fucking so. All that and the fact that there is, or at least was, a furbolg that dropped BOE white pants. That was the best rare spawn ever. Finally, we've got this one from user The Italian Fish, who tells us this. The music in Teldrassil is probably the best and most memorable music in the game. Whenever I listen to it, I get this feeling that reminds me of my first character. Back then, there was an entire world to explore, and everything was new. I still love World of Warcraft, but that sense of adventure will never be felt again. unless we do it in Classic. Am I right, listeners? So let's talk about Teldrassil a little bit and just shoot the shit over what is really, I think, probably a fair point from that user before, and it seems to be one of the zones that really did get arguably the most love and attention from Blizzard in the early design stages of the game. So we kick off in Shadowglen, we make that trip down to Dolinar, and eventually you go through, places like Starbreeze Village, the Bannerthil, Barrow Den, and eventually you go to Darnassus and everything. And it's an amazing journey, but all throughout that trip, it is, as I said before, the lush green zone teeming with life. And this again is a bit of a lore connection for me, where I have first and foremost rolled a Night Elf Rogue. It's the first character and really only character I ever really played during the vanilla World of Warcraft days. I was very much tied to this character. The first place I'm dropped into is this just, place of which is the epitome of nature in a sense. It really doesn't get much more of a show-off of a connection between the Night Elves and nature than it does in Teldrassil. It's just a beautiful zone. You get that in Ashenvale as well, but obviously Teldrassil is home. And it's just something that is tied together so well by what a number of the forum posts I just read out mentioned, the music. And just the music feels, again, in tune with that eerie, nature kind of vibe, and that I am one with the trees and one with the grass and the wind moves through me and all that bullshit. I really enjoyed it. And the point when you get to Darnassus for the first time and see that it really is quite unique architecture there in terms of the open sprawl of the city, as opposed to Ironforge and Stormwind, which are a little bit compartmentalized, if you know what I mean. It's just an absolute open view in terms of Darnassus, and I really do enjoy it. It's something that, as a Night Elf, I'll always be nostalgic for this area. It's a fantastic zone. I will miss it when I roll Horde for Classic, but, them's the breaks. I'll fall in love with the Horde zones. That's all fine. But, Teldrassil is definitely, I think, one of the greater letters of love to zone design that Blizzard has kind of laid down within the World of Warcraft. If you think I'm wrong, please do write into the show and let me know. If you think I'm right, write in anyway and let me know. But that's just how I feel about the zone and the feel and look in general. Questing wise, we've got things like the Relics of Awakening, Timberling Seeds and Timberling Sprouts, that whole quest chain, bumping into Oakenscowl in the little cave across the water. And God, we talk about the Bannerthil Barrow Den, something that I couldn't have gotten more lost in the first time I went through it. And even now to this day, there's still moments where I'm like, where the fuck do I go again? And again, we talk about non-instanced, relatively tough-ish dungeons in a way, in terms of that you really were pushed to group up for the first time, take on a challenge with some friends and see how you went. It was a little bit claustrophobic for my liking in the Barrow Den, but that's all good. You work it out, you figure out your camera, you zoom in a little bit, and it teaches you things about the game. So I really enjoyed Teldrassil, but that's been the forums for the week, everyone. That's the top 4 zones in vanilla World of Warcraft as per the forums and as per me, really. I know it's a little bit arbitrarily chosen, but that's the way we do things here. So I just wanted to touch briefly on something like that. We haven't done anything like that on the show before, and I don't really want to get too much into that going forward, but I just thought that, something that I wanted to talk about the areas in the game that we frequent. And now we scratched that itch. We'll be going a bit deeper on all of them later down the track. So if you didn't hear about your favorite zone, or if you think I left something out, then please do write to the show and let me know. And if you're a little bit angry about something that I did say in the segment, well, then we're getting to the right part of the show for you, because now it's time for anger management. Each episode, Countdown to Classic comes to you with some of the angriest posts that I've found throughout the week. And this episode, we're doing something a little special in that I've collated a bunch of listener submissions from the past 3 to 4 weeks that have been sent to the Countdown to Classic Discord channel, and also some private emails and messages to me for people who want to obviously have them read out on the show. So let's get started. This is going to be a little bit longer than usual with anger management, but it won't be too long. The crux of what I'm doing with the listener submissions will be in memory lane, but let's get through some of this anger, and we'll start with listener Guinness, who says the following. You're questing in an area that is packed with beasts. Stranglethorn Vale or Thousand Needles come to mind. You're running around and killing what you can, but it's a high population server, so sometimes you're forced to stroll about a bit as you wait for the next mob to respawn. You decide to pick up the skins of another player's kills to pass the time and proceed to start bouncing between the corpses. Attempt to skin number 1. Creature must be looted first. Attempt to skin number 2. Creature must be looted first. You pick your head up to see a field of mobs waiting to be skinned, but alas, you cannot, as some lobby has decided he's too good to pick up the vendor trash off the corpse. Come on, people, loot your kills. It's literally free money for you and me. And next we've got this one from listener Borodin, who says the following. When people who are 3 or 4 levels lower than all the surrounding mobs fly past me to take a node. Now that seriously pisses me off. They literally stand there waiting for someone to do the work for you. These little piss ants who are so fucking lazy that they need others to do their work for them, they can all gather in a large pit and starve. It's really disheartening when this happens multiple times within an hour of playtime. It makes you not want to play around people like you who do these things. So either get to a high enough level to grab your own shit or leave it alone. Next we have this one from listener Hal9K, who says this. Something that really fucking grinds my gears?
You know what really grinds my gears?
Leveling and chanting. That shit is so fucking expensive and you have to hand out free enchants while leveling. So I announce in general that I'm giving them away for free, but tips are welcome. The person who just opens up trade windows, then places the item, hits accept, and walks away like nothing happened. The least you could do is say thanks. And there's the person that's even worse than those people. The people who just don't even fucking speak or tip. 1 to 50 copper. Jesus! Next we have this one from listener Adventrium, who says, I'm just listening to the PvP versus PvE episode of the podcast now. Maybe it gets brought up later, but I've got to say this now because it's driving me nuts. So many of the PvP arguments are based on the assumption you're playing a class and spec that can actually do shit in PvP. As a holy paladin, just trying to stay alive long enough in world PvP to get away wasn't making me better or improving my immersion. As a holy paladin, I could do shit all against anyone in world PvP. So getting ganked by an assassination rogue wasn't a learning opportunity, unless the lesson was, your class sucks at this aspect of the game, and by the way, you only have one viable endgame spec, which makes you suck even more in one-on-one PvP. Next we have this one from Tian SG, who says, so you get these hardcore people, those on private servers basically practicing for Classic, as well as those who just generally only want to see end game and will power level as fast as possible to get there. After some months, those people have cleared all the content. They've made alts and cleared it with them too. They've gone full PvP. They've controlled the economy, whatever it might be. They've, for all intents and purposes, finished vanilla. Then they get on the forums, etc., demanding Blizzard either make more content or maybe make Burning Crusade servers or whatever it might be. Either Blizzard listens and those people leave for that, or they don't and they leave for boredom. Eventually, you get lower population servers, made up mostly of people taking their time, not as interested in min-maxing, people who log on when they have time, etc. And those people, in my experience, will make their own guilds. And some will want to see endgame content and they'll start slowly working through it, and life will go on. And it will for a time, But if we assume vanilla will be treated not so much as a proper MMO, being constant content releases and updates, etc., but more as a standalone game, eventually they will leave and move on to another game. I mean, it really just depends on how Blizzard sees this monetarily. Are they picturing this as a one-time investment and one-time payout, similar to most other games? Or do they want people subscribed indefinitely, in which case they'll inevitably need to dedicate time and resources to updating and adding new stuff? I think if the second approach applies, then yes, they should definitely gate content. But also, just in general, I'm tired of catering to the vocal rich. That's how WoW retail became what it is. Great endgame rating and very little anything else. By rich here, I mean rich in experience, knowing how to exploit every facet of the game to make it faster and more efficient, who finish their vanilla cone too fast and then demand for more while everyone else is still enjoying theirs. Sorry, that's quite the anger management post / end rant. Next we have this one from listener Ginerax, who says this. Today I was playing on Northdale and I saw something that really pissed me off. Now, I'm about as tired of all the greasy private server nonsense that goes on as everyone else, but today I saw something that perfectly highlights some of the problems we're all more than sick of. It wasn't cross-faction collusion, account selling, or anything extreme, but it was a perfect example of what can be exploited when there is no oversight on what is allowed to be done when you have access to unlimited free accounts. I was taking a stroll through Darnassus when I noticed an advertisement in Trade Chat. Selling awesome reserved names. 15 gold each. Whisper for details. I don't know why it struck the nerve it did, but this really fucking bothered me. You're telling me people are sitting on hordes of names of free accounts which they can make an unlimited number of, and are charging in-game currency to unlock names for a fee? This just strikes me as a huge exploit and something that should be a bannable offence. Add this to the list of reasons why I'm sick to death of private servers and look forward to playing on servers where the terms of service are actually enforced. Next we have this one from listener Aaron, who tells us this. I imagine this is not new, but going back and forth between healing in dungeons on retail and healing on private servers can be incredibly frustrating. As always, the communication in Classic is not only an enjoyable part of the experience, but it's fundamental in completing certain content. However, in retail, in a majority of my experiences, I feel that communication is a mere annoyance to some and downright infuriating to most. Time walking is a great example of this comparison. The dungeons can actually pose a challenge to which many aren't accustomed. Moreover, I offer advice and try to be friendly about it. If people even read or respond in chat, the advice is met with snide annoyance or even blame and anger, for which seems to stem from the inability to face roll the content. Sadly, out of frustration, I catch myself labeling these types of players as snowflakes, and assuming they are of the millennial generation, who seem unable to adequately deal with discomfort. Deep breaths. As much as I enjoy all aspects of World of Warcraft, both older expansions and current, this aspect is one that frustrates me and only makes me more excited for Classic. And finally, I want to take you to a post that was pointed out to me by a listener, and I do apologise to the listener who pointed this out to me. I'm not sure who it was, but thank you to that person. You'll know who you were. But this is a post that came on May 29th of 2002, and this was in response to the launch of World of Warcraft. And I just want to read this to you for a bit of a laugh, a bit of historical anger, if you will. Now, this post, I forget the website, it was posted by a user named Sir Laven, and it says this, and again, this is in relation to what World of Warcraft might be, given that it was still a few years away. This game is going to mark the end of something Blizzard has held for a long time. Integrity. For many years, the majority of online gaming was done on Battle.net, simply because it was free. I fear this moves towards a pay-to-play game. This does not bode well for the future of Blizzard. Granted, the game looks incredible. However, I'm afraid many die-hard Blizzard fans will not like having to pay $10 a month for a game they already paid for. And that's the final post of anger management. And what a post to end on. Yeah. I'm sure no one's going to want to play World of Warcraft. You picked it, guy. Anyway, I thought you'd get a kick out of that one. But with all that anger out of the way, I've been sitting on a fair few amazing memory lane submissions for a while now. And so buckle up, because this one might take a little while. And let's listen to some amazing vanilla tales of success and failure as we go through an extended edition of Memory Lane. Each week on Countdown to Classic, I bring you some of the listeners' more funny or fond memories from back in the days with vanilla World of Warcraft. Now please, saddle up, grab yourself a hot cup of cocoa or however it is that you laze away during the day, because we're going to be here for a little bit. I've got a whole bunch of awesome memories to run through with you. So we start with listener Adventrium, who tells us this. I was a dwarf paladin healing undead Stratholme. I had a mix of Lightbringer and Knight Champion gear, so I looked golden and holy as fuck. We're on the final boss, Baron Rivendare. I'm not sure what happened, maybe I fucked up, but at about 25% remaining, the tank went down. Rivendare chopped through the DPS, killing each in turn so quickly I couldn't even heal them as they were being hit. So I ran to the rune thing where you have to tank him, equip a weapon and shields that aren't intelligence focused, and square up against the Baron. At this point, he only had about 15% health. I fought as hard as I could. I blew every cooldown, every consumable I had available to me, every use item I had equipped. I can still remember what song was playing, Crack with Jack by the amazing Irish fiddler Eileen Ivers. I can oddly remember this, but I don't even remember one boss from any BC dungeon. Anyway, just as I was completely out of options, I took that motherfucker down. My party went nuts in the chat. They were cheering me on the whole time and they couldn't believe I'd done it, saving everyone a run back and also just because it was cool. So I mana up and res everyone before looting. And guess what fucking drops? The something like 1 in 10,000 drop chance death charges reigns. I can't believe it actually happened, but the party deferred to me and let me have the mount because of my epic last stand against Rivendare. To this day, when I occasionally log into retail, I mount up on that thing every chance I get. My dwarf paladin on his skeletal steed. Next we have this one from listener Beecher, who tells us this. Seeing screenshots on the WoW Classic subreddit from the PvP raid on the newly opened realm Northdale made me think of a rather fond memory from back in vanilla. Way back before I had found my right place amongst the ranks of the Horde, I played a little dwarf paladin on the Stormrage server, EU, not really knowing that much about the big world of Azeroth, other than the stuff I remembered from Warcraft 2 and 3. I'd proudly bought the game for and by myself in February 2005, but it took a couple of months of convincing various family members to pay the monthly fee I totally didn't know anything about. Wink, wink. Fast forward a few weeks, and there I was running around in wetlands, questing alone. All of a sudden, 2 night elves and a human came running by, yelling, "For the Alliance!" and other things. Curious as young me was back then, and having nothing better to do, I simply started following them. It turned out there was this thing called a raid going on, and I was happily invited to a group with 30 plus people, still not really knowing where we were going. Well, a boat ride and some understatement here, walking later, we were there. This huge barren wasteland opened up and I just felt so small in this increasingly large world. We walked up to this rather large gathering of Alliance players, apparently there was a couple of raid groups formed since there were so many of us, under a few trees along the path to Ratchet, and I was promptly told to flag for PvP. This was a normal server that I was on, and to get ready. All of a sudden, this tremendous non-ending line line of horde players starts pouring out of the crossroads, and I remember I started to run for my life. It didn't really matter though, because not 3 seconds later I was charged by a warrior and swiftly dealt with in a single blow. That was my very first taste of PvP. I swallowed my pride, corpse walked back, and joined the others again, taking part in one of, in my mind, the most classic raid experiences you can think of. Raiding your other faction just for the heck of it. I will never forget the glorious and chaotic days of World PvP. Next we have this submission from listener Shane, who tells us this. I recall when I first got into World of Warcraft, a close family friend of mine had told my brothers and me about the game, as at the time we were heavily into RuneScape, but he told us that World of Warcraft was similar in some respects, but 10,000 times better. I recall watching him do a Nixia at my house when I was like 9. The final push that made me try the game was the South Park episode, which by this timeline, I'd been playing just a few months because of the release of Burning Crusade. As a 9-year-old, I'm sure you can imagine that I was shit at the game, but nonetheless, I was in complete awe at the magnificent world that Blizzard had created. My first character was a warlock, and after doing the first few quests, collecting wolf pelts and Millie's Harvest, I came across another player called MTTM. Now, MTTM asked me if I was new, to which I replied yes. He then proceeded to summon an imp, which at the time I considered to be an amazing feat. Curious as to how he achieved this, I inquired as to how I could get my own imp. He offered to be my trainer and showed me the ropes. We went over the river in Northshire Abbey and I did my class quest to get my imp. From then on, MTTM, or Tyler as I would later know him as, became great friends. However, me being an easily controllable 9-year-old was convinced by my two brothers to switch from my realm, Malorn, to my family friend's realm, Bloodhoof. I managed to level a character to around 37, a warrior, who I was actually very proud of at the time. However, once again, easily controlled, my other brother convinced me to go back to our old realm, Malorn, where I once again leveled a fresh lock, likely having deleted the other one as I foolishly always deleted my characters for whatever reason. Fast forward to the Fargo Deep Mines, where I'm looking for kobold candles. A level 32 hunter is there collecting linen cloth and ore by the name of Haku. Well, you guessed it, it ended up being Tyler. From that point on, Tyler, my brother and I became very close, even going as far as sharing accounts and phone numbers so we could communicate via voice, as I guess at the time we weren't aware of Vent. I ended up getting that lock relatively geared for a level 32, and I got him to STV. Around this time, I began having issues with account security, and I think in my youthful ignorance, I admitted to sharing an account to Blizzard, hoping that they'd give me mercy and just allow me to reset my password. Well, nope. The account ended up getting banned, and I was left to restart all of my progress. Moral of the story: don't account share, and be wary of trusting people on the internet. I still don't know for sure if Tyler is the one who hacked me, even though it more than likely was him. Tyler, if you're listening, fuck you, from Shane. Next we have this one from Reldurf, who tells us this. Hi Josh, I'm from Argentina and I love the show. I must say, I've never strictly played vanilla since my first World of Warcraft experience was on Burning Crusade on a private server, and I didn't play Blizzard servers until Wrath of the Lich King's Naxx patch, but still, I have good memories from back then that I'd like to share. I had a love-hate relationship with a particular place that brought me nightmares because of the unfair amount of mobs and their fast respawn rate, and that was Curzon's compound in northeast Stranglethorn Vale. You know, the quest chain that makes you go back there from time to time. Going into that cave would sometimes mean killing a lot of mobs you don't need to, just to clear your path. And if you weren't fast enough, they would respawn right behind you and ruin the whole process, and you'd have to start all over again. Or at least that was my way of viewing things back then. Nevertheless, after all that frustration and good/bad moments, stress and paranoia, because I would spin my camera 360 degrees while killing something, or even whilst gathering a flower, I would go back to whatever main city or leveling town I had my Hearthstone set to and check my new talents. Oh yeah, long talent trees. That cozy feeling of being no longer in danger and being able to focus on the other parts of my character. Organizing what I'd learned on the battlefield is by far the best feeling this game has given me as a leveler. Next we have this post from listener Disposable Beans, who says this. My most clear memory of playing Vanilla World of Warcraft goes back to when I was in middle school and first experiencing the wonderful new world before me. I made numerous characters, wanting to see all the areas and classes that I could, including an orc shaman and a dwarf hunter, whose names I can't recall sadly. In Durotar with my orc, there was a quest to kill a black and red scorpid that a young me thought was the coolest looking beast in the game. Being foolish and assuming that that was the only scorpid that looked like that in the whole game, I logged on to my then level 10 dwarf hunter, determined to make that pet mine. I ran to Ironforge and asked as many people as I could for directions to Durotar. As you could imagine, most people thought I was goofing. After receiving some guidance, I worked my way through Loch Madan, the wetlands, and I took a boat to Darkshore, ran down to Ashenvale, through the Barrens, and eventually got to Durotar and claimed my prize. Unsurprisingly, as a level 10 dwarf, this took hours and hours of dying to everything within a kilometre radius of me wherever I was. But it was all worth it for my beautiful, and in my blissfully ignorant mind, one-of-a-kind scorpid. Why is it that I didn't just make an orc hunter and acquire it that way? We'll never know. I wasn't a bright child. Next we have this one from listener Minoru, who tells us this. Back when chat roulette was a big thing, a group of friends and I were going through chatting with random people, when suddenly the next person we chatted with was the Lich King. Someone put their camera up against the promotional giant version of the Wrath of the Lich King box you find in game stores. In a sad twist of fate, we played chat roulette in the wrong dorm, because sitting a few minutes away, just a bit too far in a separate dorm, was our own game store Wrath of the Lich King box. The Lich King was not meant to see his own reflection in chat roulette, I guess. Next we have this post from listener David, and this is a long one, but it's a good one, so listen up. My story begins in 2004. As a 13 or 14-year-old, I'd been playing competitive Call of Duty 1 tournaments for almost 2 years, with one of the most successful COD clans back in the day, winning multiple global leagues. For 2 years, I'd made some amazing friendships with some of the most talented COD players I had ever seen. About 10 of the guys, however, were talking to me about the up-and-coming World of Warcraft game. I had no idea as to what an MMORPG would entail, so a few of the guys introduced me to RuneScape to give me an idea as to what to expect, and I loved the concept. As a massive Lord of the Rings fan, this really appealed to me. So we waited until the game's release, and the day finally came, but I had really no idea what to expect. At this stage, COD was my Bible, and such a huge part of my life, and I thought I would play WoW for maybe a few weeks and then go back to killing COD with our clan. How wrong I was. Like I said, we maybe had 10 or so guys that I knew well, and we started alliance characters on the Dune Mall server. I initially started a Night Elf Hunter, and my god, my mind was blown in that starting area. I had never seen that scale in a game before, and it felt so much like the elves atmosphere from Lord of the Rings. I was immediately hooked. After a couple of days as a hunter, I decided to change race and class, and to base my experience on Gimli from Lord of the Rings, and started a dwarf warrior instead, creatively named Death Dwarf. Those early days in 1.1 were incredible. To share the experience with 10 guys I knew well was amazing. We started a guild which went on to become top 3 on the server. We recruited more guys from our old COD clan and brought in new recruits. It was so exciting. The leveling experience to 60 seems to take an age, especially for a warrior. Everyone seems to have so many cool abilities, but we seemed so limited. Later on, I realized I was just poo at playing the class. Some of my favorite memories from the leveling stage were as follows. Coming across Horde characters for the first time in Ashenvale Forest. They had clearly ventured too far from the Barrens, and we ganked them for hours. It really felt like an us versus them experience, where you despised each and every Horde character as if they were truly the enemy during those vanilla days. Experiencing the madness of South Shore versus Tarren Mill for a few weeks, where the ground was more white than green, littered with thousands of corpses. Me rushing into battle as a level 30, thinking as a warrior I should be unkillable, but instead becoming furious that I was getting almost one-shotted by equal-level shamans using Frost Shock, and having Shadow Priest dotting me into submission from all angles. I was useless. running Scarlet Monastery more times than I can count, forever chasing Herod's bloody shoulder, only for it to become useless once I hit 40, but mainly the insanity required to get into the instance with multiple parties ganking in that corridor. I'm not sure if anyone else remembers, but having the original buggy Bloodthirst ability, which I believe when activated would give 100% damage increase, and getting an execute crit at level 30-ish for like 9k. This was changed very fast by Blizzard. PvP and Stranglethorn, rogues bloody everywhere all the time. When Warsong was released, but mainly the ganking that took place in Ashenvale between parties waiting to join was hilarious. My friends and I taking and holding Gadget Sand for a whole day, killing all Horde characters that came by and ganking them over and over. Eventually we started a war there and were defeated by what felt like half of the Horde population. When I hit 60, investing what felt like weeks in getting my Arcanite Reaper. I loved this weapon. The looks, the stats, everything. I never got rid of this weapon, even when better gear dropped. I decided to always use my Arcanite Reaper, and I became almost instantly recognizable on my server for always using it no matter what. Next we have this one from listener Beatstick, who says this. I started a warlock named Dagar with my BC trial as my first character. I loved the idea of dots and leveled as affliction, but refused to use fear up until the mid-40s as I thought it was cowardly and thought my awesome shadow power should be enough. This led me to lose a couple of duels with people scratching their heads afterwards as they were far lower than me. I also got an awesome blue staff of Westfall from a guildie running me through the dead mines and used to melee once my dots were up. I will never forget the time a mage and I were out of mana on 10% health in Arathi Basin and I ran up and beat him to death. He was so confused. I gave up on the warlock at 55 as it was so slow and leveled a shaman, then warrior before learning how warlocks actually worked and grinded mobs through the last few levels in Silithus to get to Outland. Now, I know that was a TBC story, but that's okay. We'll have it. We'll have it anyway. Next, we've got this one from Zombie Guts, who tells us this. A memory lane for me would be meeting my friend My Missy Moo. It was early Wrath of the Lich King and I did my first Eye of Eternity as a lower gear level Holy Paladin. I managed to keep it together enough to finish the raid, but my numbers were subpar. One of the druids in the raid offered to help me do more heroic content and farm up some TOC gear. We ended up grouping regularly for months after that, just for good company and reliable dungeon runs. Here we are over 10 years later and she has ended up moving across the country to be with my best friend where they've lived happily for the last 3 years. While I'm sure this is a common story, it made me realize how many people may have missed opportunities for friendship like this because of the LFD implementation that came shortly after. I sometimes wonder how different our lives would have been if that LFD had launched just a few months sooner. Now, I know that's the Wrath of the Lich King story, but again, how about we just make this general memory lane stories from any time of World of Warcraft? It's all good, people. Anyway, we've got this one next from Permadrunk, who tells us this. Quick memory lane. It's a little offbeat because it's not a particular memory, but one of my favorite things in the vanilla days was Realm forum banter and shitposting. I've said so many times before how the community is a huge part of vanilla, and the drama and bonding that went on in those Realm forums was a great part of the game for me. Posting screen caps of you camping the guild that always gloated the most and calling them out for being bad just to start shit was awesome fun. Next we have this one from TRNSG, who says this. So I've got a ton of stories from retail vanilla days, but I wanted to start with the most important one, how I met my best friend in World of Warcraft. I started playing in December 2004 when my brother-in-law lent me his copy and let me play on his account as a kind of trial run. I was 16 at the time and had never played an MMO before. My only RPG experience at that point was Knights of the Old Republic. So I rolled a Night Elf Warrior because I thought it looked cool. And I loved the experience. But around level 8, I had my first really challenging quest, to venture into a dangerous furbolg cave and reclaim some important artifact. I was having difficulty outside the entrance when a friendly hunter, a few levels higher than me, named Mirandel, offered to help. We became fast friends and she was awesome, helping me with quests and even at one point escorting me all the way to Ironforge so I could see the hub of the Alliance. But after New Year's, my brother-in-law left, taking his account with him. By the time I saved enough to buy the game and create an account a few months later, he had deleted my character and we couldn't remember what server I had been on, so I never saw Mirandel again. But instead, in her memory, I created my own Night Elf Hunter on the Dune Mall server. Around level 10, I saw a lower level druid named Sirona who was struggling with the Furbolg Cave, so remembering my friend, I offered to help Sirona with the quest. Sure enough, Sirona and I became fast friends as well. Our adventures would be numerous from that point, joining guilds together, taking down dungeons together, discovering the world together, and more. She was easily the best friend I ever made in World of Warcraft. We still stay in touch occasionally today, despite both of us long since moving on from the game. But I'll always remember Mirandel, my first WoW friend, who showed me that WoW was more than just a world of fantasy, elves, and dragons. It was a world of kindness, community, generosity, and most importantly, friendship. Next we have this one from listener Matto. I remember when I hit 40 on my first character back in vanilla. Just before I leveled, I queued up for Warsong Gulch. I hit 40 and then went to buy my mount. I was still able to enter that battleground even though I was a level above everyone else. They were all blown away by the fact that I had a mount and they didn't. It was very much so a big advantage on my part. Next we have this one from listener Starlina, who says this. So listening to your mate talk about LAN partying reminded me of the best drunk WoW story that I should have told on my call-in. Me, our main tank, my healing buddy, his girlfriend, now wife, who we met in WoW, and our best mage decided we were going to meet up for the Wrath of the Lich King launch and spent 3 days doing nothing but leveling and drinking. And boy, did we ever. So since the couple was in Boston and my mage friend was in Jersey, I drew the short stick and we ended up meeting in Jersey for the launch. We all got there the day before launch and went out to eat and then went to the liquor store and bought a handle of Bacardi 151. If you've never had it, it's 75.5% alcohol by volume rum and a bottle of Goldschlager. I don't know whose idea this was or why. The next 3 days is a haze, to say the least. Most of it was the rest of us acting like fools while the girlfriend, who is Irish and could drink us all under the table, yelled at us to put our tunes on follow so we could actually get somewhere. We were drunk to the point that when I leveled my DK several months later, I literally remembered none of the quests we had done over those 3 days. Now, the tank buddy was 20 and pretty inexperienced at drinking. He'd never been drunk before, so I kept trying to caution him to take it easy. But by the second night, he'd quit listening to me and drank himself sick. So he crawls back to the bathroom for long enough that I forgot he was back there. After an hour or so, he comes stumbling out and says in his Boston accent, I don't know if I should kick the ass at the person who left shit streaks in the toilet or thank them for helping me get every drop of vomit out. We died laughing and it became a running joke for the next 3 years. Next we have this one from listener Boom Kingley, who says this. Back in late vanilla / early TBC, I played a level 39 Feral Druid and one of my best friends played a level 39 Rogue. We had stopped at 39 to do some PvP in that bracket, but were also doing some exploring. By chance, we happened to sneak onto a boat that landed in Menethil Harbour. We felt like stowaway fugitives making our way to a new land, hiding in stealth in the bowels of the boat. Neither of us had ever seen Menethil Harbour, so we were beyond excited. We exited the boat and the first thing we were greeted by was about 5 Alliance characters, mostly of our level and lower, dueling or simply waiting on the docks. Being the avid PvPers that we were, we attempted to attack several of them. While we were able to kill quite a few each time we tried, we were always outnumbered or outleveled. Eventually, while we were waiting on health regen after a 2-minute res timer, we noticed that the Alliance liked to duel on the docks while waiting for the boats to arrive. We had an amazing amount of fun waiting until both parties were low in the duel, and then popping out a stealth to one-shot the low health players, and then running away with glee and laughter, only to re-stealth and do it all again. We must have spent 2 days terrorizing the docks of Menethil Harbour until somebody brought their human warrior to the docks and parked him there like he had just accepted a guard job. He proceeded to kill us every time we came out of stealth. What a dick! Bringing your high level to gank us on the docks of Menethil Harbour? /sarcasm. We still came back every now and then to terrorize the docks throughout Burning Crusade, but the memory of our first time landing there still lives on. Now, for the final memory lane submission, I've got this one, and I don't know if it's true, but I never let the truth get in the way of a good story. Plus, it does seem like an odd thing for a listener to submit a wacky story like this that they made up for a World of Warcraft classic podcast. I don't know, stranger things have happened. But for the purposes of this final reading of the segment, as far as I'm concerned, a user with the handle PM me your Volvasaur is nothing but an honourable paragon of truth and virtue. So here we go with PM me your Volvasaur's submission, and they say the following. Hi Josh, been listening to the podcast, big fan. I've got a story for you and something I was thinking about a few days ago when rolling my character. Maybe you can use it for the show. Back in the days of vanilla World of Warcraft, I played pretty often, and I was in a mid-level raiding guild, and as with any guild, we had our cliques. Ours was about 6 or 7 of us. Within this clique, we had Tim, who played a male Night Elf hunter, and Jamie. She played a female Night Elf restoration druid. Over a few months, it became pretty obvious that there was something going on between these two. They were always together in the game and playing at the same time. Essentially, if you got one, you got the other. Fast forward a few more months and Tim and Jamie were finally going to meet. He was going to travel to her city and, I assume, hopefully transfer their affection for one another to the server that is in real life. There was one little problem though. Jamie's penis. Yep. Jamie was pretending to be a girl in the game, and to the person that she was having an 8-month virtual relationship with. Now, I think I'm a pretty ballsy guy, and I'm willing to take risks and don't get fazed easily, but my balls are nothing compared to that of Jamie's, perhaps even literally, when he went so far as to have Tim come to see him, knowing that full and well he was going to realize that he wasn't a girl. So, Tim visits, which might have been awkward. Next week is a little weird within the group, as we all kind of know now what happened, but we're unsure how to react to a pretty big event like that. Anyway, fast forward to present day. Tim and Jamie are engaged to be married, and I get to enjoy the lonely single life. Catfishing 1, me 0. And that's been memory lane, everyone. And wasn't that quite the doozy to go out with? I hope you all enjoyed the segment. Thank you for sitting through all those fantastic stories. And thank you so much to all those listeners for sending them in. I'm already getting more sent in for the next one, and I always look forward to that segment. But now, it's time for a listener call, or 2 listeners calling in, I should say, all about gaming with a Y in World of Warcraft in today's Calling Countdown. Okay, we've got another couple of callers on the line, and we're speaking with Elrim, is that right? Where in the world are you calling from, Elrim?
I'm from Iowa. That's in the U.S.
Fantastic. And we've also got Ungath, is that right? Am I pronouncing that correctly?
I say Ungath. You can say Ungath, but I say Ungath.
Too easy. And where in the world are you calling from?
I'm calling from Singapore. I'm from Scotland, but I'm calling from Singapore today.
Very good. All right. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show, guys. Now, the reason that I've obviously put the both of you in this one call is that we're going to be talking about the same topic. So you both approached me individually, and since I figured we were going to be talking about the same thing, you were both kind enough to agree to obviously talk about it together. So thank you very much for that. And that topic today is the subject of gay gamers in World of Warcraft. So what I'm going to be asking both of you is a bit about your experiences within the game and how you've enjoyed it and any of the kind of communities that you found within the game. So I might start with you, Elrim. Can you give us a little bit of an introduction into your time in World of Warcraft as a gay gamer?
All right. Well, in MMOs in general, I started well before WoW, and when I got to WoW, I heard about it well in advance. I was pretty much planning my character before the beta was out, or at least around that time. So in the open beta, I got my first character, started up, and I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And I didn't necessarily seek out other gay gamers in the game, but I just happened to find them every now and then just because I wasn't really shy about it. So I was essentially out while gaming. I don't know if that's common among other gay gamers, but I just kind of let it be out there for people to know. And other people reach out to me, usually discreetly, but just got to know them and made friends that way.
And how about you, Ungath? What were your experiences within the game?
Yeah, my journey's been a little bit different. I'm only 24, so when I first started World of Warcraft, I would have been about 12 years old in 2005. So I definitely didn't know that I was a gay male. At that point in my life. Growing up though, when I sort of realized my sexuality, I was definitely out within the World of Warcraft community and games online. And even to this day, I don't shy away from it, but, it's a unique experience, I think, being gay, but also being a gamer, because these things kind of clash a lot.
And Elrim, I'll come back to you for a second, and we'll obviously just pass the baton, so to speak, and I'll go between the two of you for each of these questions. Elrim, you say that you obviously were quite, it sounded, you laughed a little bit, and you said you were quite out there from the beginning. And if you could just extrapolate a little bit on that, when you're talking to people in-game, what would you mean by that you weren't backwards in coming forwards in a way?
I was in a guild back in the day, and I got really close with a lot of friends on there. We're on, what was it at the time? Ventrilo. We chat all the time, and I just wasn't really shy about my sexuality and just talked about life in general. You get to know people pretty well. And so one of my guild officers at the time had messaged me and, talked about his experiences, and because he was quite a bit older. I think he must have been in his 40s, and at the time I was like 18 playing. So he and I were talking. We'd like whisper about things because he was big into the gay community in real life, but not necessarily in game. And so I got to know him pretty well, and there were a couple other people I got to know later on. But especially in Classic, most of the people I knew were not gay gamers, but I just kind of let myself be out there and known, and people came to me essentially.
And Ungath, my question for you, flowing on from that, would be that you mentioned that when you started playing World of Warcraft, you weren't quite sure of your sexuality, and it's something that obviously you had a realization later on after you'd already started in the game. This might be a silly question, but did you see any difference at all between proudly coming out in real life versus proudly coming out in a virtual life, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think because we have such a high level of anonymity within games, it wasn't as difficult to come out in games. So, I could tell someone, yeah, I'm, if we were in guild chat or in a raid or whatever, I could tell someone, yeah, I'm gay. And it never really, it was a lot less scarier than I thought it was going to be, because at the end of the day, if someone was homophobic or wasn't really happy with my sexuality, it was easy just to log out of the game or block them or mute them or anything like that. So I thought it was going to be a lot more difficult than it actually was. In real life, it was a lot harder because, you can't block someone in real life. You can't turn around to family or friends and say, okay, whatever, we'll never see each other again. So, it was a lot more easier. In a sense, it was kind of freeing for me anyway. And I can imagine it can be very freeing for people who live in quite a toxic environment in terms of their sexuality. So, it was a lot easier. I was a little bit apprehensive because in the gaming world, being gay can be seen as a negative thing, and it's often used as a slur or a derogatory term. But really, the anonymity actually saved us from that. It was quite good.
And in raising something now that I was going to get to eventually, I'm glad it's come up organically now. Elrim, I'll turn to you and I'll ask you on this point. Ungath just mentioned, obviously, that, yes, it is something that unfortunately comes up as a bit of a slur, and clearly it comes up in real life as well. I don't doubt that it's something that you deal with walking around too. But in the virtual world, particularly a world like World of Warcraft, where it seems to be, to me, something that's so prevalent and a knee-jerk reaction, obviously, amongst gamers with that level of anonymity that people enjoy, with just the reflex, gay, you're gay. How does that make you feel as a gamer when you're running around and seeing stuff like that pop up in world chat?
I didn't experience a lot of it directed at me specifically. There were definitely times in games, not necessarily WoW, where you kind of get to know people and you're gaming with them over a long period of time. I would say the people that I had told were generally pretty accepting just because they wanted to keep me around as a player. If somebody had said something, I think somebody would interject and, stand up for me. I had pretty good friends. But in other games, much less, more transient games, or games today like League of Legends, where it's just you're in, you're out, you're in, you're out. You don't really get to know anybody. That kind of talk is all over the place, but I wouldn't dare even bring up my sexuality in a game like that. And yeah, it is hurtful, but it's a little easy to be guarded online, especially it's kind of different than say you get on voice chat and you're a female gamer, everybody knows you're a female gamer, essentially. There's some gay people who they get on voice chat and people will know and they'll get flack for that. And I that happens. It sucks. It's awful. But I would always, stand up for those types of people, or, try and be at least somebody to defend them, because yeah, it sucks. It really sucks having that directed at you. And I have had that happen in real life, at least.
Ungath, flowing on from that and on that great point of obviously sometimes jumping into voice chat in the game and speaking with fellow players that you might be grouping up with or running a raid with or something like that, have you ever come across any kind of issues on your end in terms of moments where you've identified yourself as a gay gamer and in voice chat had any awkward situations flow on from that?
Yeah, there's definitely been situations like that. I believe that my voice, I feel that you can tell my sexuality through my voice. I'm quite feminine. There was a situation quite recently in Overwatch. I pretty much play most Blizzard games, where my friend was on voice chat, and they have quite a feminine voice, and someone came on and tried to, make some slurs about their sexuality. And I'm very much someone who'll just, put my 2 cents in and try to bring them down a peg. So I feel that as a community, a lot more people are more receptive if you kind of stand up for yourself or stand up for a teammate who's experiencing homophobia or a racial slur or anything like that. If you kind of put your fork in the ground and say, no, that's not acceptable, they normally back off now, which is quite surprising. It's completely different from, say, 10 years ago.
And Elrim, just piggybacking off of that point, have you had any sort of record scratch moments, if you will, where someone has said something and you've said, well, I'm gay, so what the fuck?
Kind of. I wouldn't say it was necessarily with my sexuality, but again, Overwatch, story comes to mind where we were playing a game and this girl was making calls, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, one of the guys in the team was just tearing her up left and right for being a female gamer and saying really awful things. And I spoke up, and actually the 3 other teammates spoke up as well. Like, just all of us were like, "You're an idiot. Stop this. There's no reason for you to be acting like this." And we're all standing up for this person. And that at least made me feel good that out of 5 of us, 4 of us had the sense to not do something like that and to stand up and say something about it.
Okay. Elrim, I'll stick with you just for this next question. You mentioned in your sort of opening point that you have found communities or guilds, and I think you mentioned in your first contact with me that you found particular guilds that had a number of gay gamers in them. So my question would be, for any gay gamers that might be listening, and obviously are avid World of Warcraft fans, if they're not aware, can you describe the community a little bit and the ability to find guilds of like-minded players?
I didn't necessarily seek them out. It just kind of happened organically. And it wasn't until about Wrath of the Lich King that I kind of found a group of people that just so happened. That was about the time that 10-man guilds were around, so you could have much smaller groups. And just by luck, we had like 5 gay people or so in the guild by that time. So essentially half our raid is gay gamers. I didn't really seek out other gamers until Reddit came about, and I got into the gamer subreddit, and that was kind of eye-opening for me. It really helped me to kind of find other people I connect with, and there's a lot of games that they are interested in, and there's kind of different subreddits that go on from there. So that's really where I kind of got exposed to like just the community online in general.
And Ungath, I'll turn to you now for your experiences. Do you find that you try to gravitate towards it sort of either in-game or out-of-game, like Elrim said, whether it be subreddits or on Twitter or anything like that? Do you turn to like-minded gamers and groups where you can chat about things, or do you really not care about who you're grouping up with in the game? Or like, what I'm saying is it a preference, or it just doesn't matter?
For me, it doesn't really matter. I think that I kind of get along with people who are completely the opposite of me. I like to experience what they experience and kind of see the world through their eyes. There was a short period of time, I'd say, during Mists of Pandaria, where I had a few friends in real life who I found out also played World of Warcraft. So I kind of had a phase where I would say I gamed with a lot of gamers. But other than that, looking back at my time on Warcraft as a whole, I would say most guilds that I've been a part of or been a core member of the team of, they've not been, a gay guild or anything like that. And people have been from pretty much all walks of life. I would say if I had to get along with any demographic, it's normally middle-aged mums, which is quite funny.
Well, you raised an interesting point there, and please just let me know if this is the silliest question I'll ever ask in my life. But Elrim, I'll turn to you now. And in terms of the gay community in real life outside of games, so if you go and you're speaking with people at a bar or something like that, is there any stigma behind being a gamer as a gay man? Like, my example is obviously if I'm dating, if I'm going out and going out with certain women, they'd say, "Oh, you're a 35-year-old man who plays games. What the fuck?" And sometimes you get a bit of shit for that. Is there any kind of that stigma in the gay community, or it's just pretty much, whatever it is, that no one really cares? Do you know what I mean?
I would say it kind of depends. Definitely people I've met that they identify as gamers as well. It's kind of its own like sub-demographic within within the demographic itself. But I would say generally there aren't very many gamers out there. And so when you're trying to connect with people or meet people out there, it's sometimes a little bit odd because not everybody's really into games, especially MMOs. That's an even more sub-demographic, if you will. I would say I don't know if I get a lot of backlash, but then again, I don't really bring up that I play MMOs specifically. I focus on the other games that I have, and then if it comes up that, it's kind of like I'm a closet MMO gamer among gay men.
Okay, I see. Ungath, I'll ask you a similar question in terms of, and my interest is just piqued by this because obviously, I don't think it's an outrageous thing to say that the gaming industry does lean slightly more towards men jumping into the hobby than women. Obviously women play games, but I think it's not a stretch to say that perhaps a little bit more men than women play. But my question is directed at that, in that, do you find that because it's an interest that many men share, does it come up with you in real life, or are you ostracized somewhat for being into video gaming within the community?
Well, I think it's a double-edged sword in my opinion. I think that some people in the gay community either fetishize it or they're completely off-put by it. A lot of people will look at it as, oh my God, this is completely different from, people that I date, or someone will be like, oh, there's a reason I don't date people like this. I don't like geeks. It's quite a bad stereotype, or it's quite a good stereotype. I feel that it often comes up in conversation with me, not just in my dating life, but in my personal life, when people get to know me and what I did at university, because I studied psychology and games design. So it comes up through normally that channel, not through any other means normally for me. So I find that, I find it can either be good or bad in that sense in the gay community.
Okay. Elrim, just to sort of wrap up on this topic, if you could say something, and I'll give you the chance now, obviously, to general listeners of the show about things they might not be aware of, that, there's more gay gamers out there than they realize. If you could tell people something about gay gamers in World of Warcraft, what would it be?
I would say, is this directed at like gay gamers that want to get involved, or is this at other people reaching out to other gay gamers?
Let's cover both.
Okay. Well, if I was reaching out to gay gamers who wanted to get involved with WoW Classic, I would say look for the subreddits. Like Gamers is a good subreddit for games in general, and usually there's a post every now and then about gay WoW guilds. I see it fairly frequently. There's unofficial gay servers that people, congregate to. If you really want to be involved with other gay gamers and that's important to you, I would reach out to communities like that. And on the opposite side, somebody who's just playing the game and is playing around on other gay gamers, especially young gay gamers, it's really important to be sensitive about the topic, and it's a journey to get through, especially when you're a young age, to kind of come to terms with your sexuality. And the internet is probably the first place people come out to other people because they're generally scared to talk to people in real life. So if somebody does talk to you about that, I would say be receptive, be interested in what they have to say, or at least be positive. That's really the best thing you can do, is don't be negative about that sort of topic. And it's very helpful. You don't know what kind of support that you can offer them or damage you could do if you jump down their throat about it.
And Ungath, turning over to you, is there one thing that you would say, perhaps as words of advice, or just a general sort of thing you'd like people to know, both that you would say to gay gamers and to non-gay gamers, about, the gay gaming community within World of Warcraft?
To gay gamers, I would say use Warcraft as a tool for exploring your identity. Go out there, and if you want to try out a specific class or try out a specific race or gender or anything like that within World of Warcraft, because you have an interest in that, but society tells you can't do that, just do it. Screw society. Just go and do what you want to do, because gaming is so beneficial for discovering who you are. And to people who aren't gay, we're here. We're part of the gaming community. And just support us, just because we're gay, it doesn't mean we're bad at DPS and we can't tank. All we can do is heal. That's not how it works. So we're here. Please don't put stereotypes on us.
Very well said, guys. Well, look, I just want to thank both of you so much for calling into the show and obviously for being so open about this topic and sharing your experiences within the world of Warcraft. Thanks so much to both of you, and I'd love to perhaps chat to you about anything else you'd like to speak about later down the track.
All right. Thanks, Josh.
Thanks, Josh, for having us on. It's been great.
And that's Calling Countdown, and thank you so much again to Ungath and Elrim for taking part in that call and being so candid with their stories about their time in game. I really do appreciate it. But with all that done, it's time for some shout outs to round out the show. So shout out to members of the Countdown Council, and they are Flozy B, Raidmar, Palfurus, Permadrunk, Rarebit, The Anton, Wilson Mar, and Valaco. Thank you so much for your phenomenal support of the show. Countdown to Classic would not be the same without your support. And also, a big thank you to supporters Bossman764, Hurlbert, Good Kisser, Myrtle Banks, Purgatos81, and Zudamos, as always. That's enough from me for today, everyone. I'll be seeing you actually very soon. I'll be seeing you in about 48 hours time. I delayed this episode and I do apologize again for that. But next you'll get me on Monday morning when I'll come at you with a great interview all about PvP and the potential for vanilla WoW to be a bit of a player in the esports game. Who knows? Let's talk about it, and you'll hear my chat with OG or Haptics all about that topic. So I do look forward to that one for a bit of a PvP analysis, and also how we can, have a bit of fun with that in watching or viewing it and spectating it when Vanilla WoW comes out. On top of that, I'll also play at some point, probably in Monday's episode, a call I took all about Dire Maul, which is about a 45-minute breakdown with some really great analysis of Dire Maul that I hope that you'll enjoy as well. So I look forward to seeing you all next week. Thanks so much again for being patient and waiting for this episode. Have a great weekend. Bye.